Chapter 1. Departure. The cold wind blew across the empty platform, like an invisible guide pointing the way to the unknown. Edward gripped the collar about it. He tucked the phone into his pocket and leaned against the glass. Silence. No footsteps. No voices. No familiar hum of the carriage. For a moment he thought he heard someone whispering, but when he looked around, he didn't see anyone. Maybe it was just the wind outside the walls of the carriage. Chapter 3. Ghost Passenger. An hour later, in the mirror above the aisle, he noticed movement. A silhouette. Someone was walking down the hallway with slow, cautious steps. Edward turned around sharply. It was empty, but the moment he turned back, something changed. An object appeared on the seat across from him. A watch, an antique pocket watch with a chain, lying exactly in the center of the chair. He froze. He was alone in the railroad car. He would surely notice if someone walked by and left it behind. His hand slowly reached for the find, but before he touched the metal, the train jerked and the lights flickered. In brief flashes, he saw a reflection in the glass. Behind him stood a man. Chapter 4. Captive on the Night Express. Edward turned around sharply. It was empty, only his own breathing, heavy, hitching. His hands were trembling. He wasn't a coward, but something in this train car whispered to him, "Run." But where to? He rushed to the exit, pulled the handle. The door wouldn't budge. It was locked. All the doors were locked. There was a sound behind him, a faint, scratching sound, as if fingernails were running along the wood of a chair. He turned around. There was a man sitting in one of the seats. No, not a man. His eyes were as empty as two dark holes. His skin was mottled with deep cracks like parched earth. "You shouldn't have gotten in here," the creature wheezed, slowly raising its head. Edward shouted. Chapter 5. A trap with no way out. He rushed to the opposite end of the wagon, trying to open the doors. But none would budge. The train wouldn't stop. It was as if time had frozen. When he turned around, the creature was gone. But now he could feel its presence. It's not gone. It was somewhere close by. He had to get out, find a way to stop the train. But how? And was he even still in the real world? Chapter 6. Where does this track lead? Edward took a deep breath, trying to gather his thoughts. He walked slowly through the carriage, feeling the rumbling echo of each step. The lights on the ceiling flickered again, and for a moment he thought the walls of the carriage began to shrink. Suddenly the train jerked sharply. Edward slumped to the floor, his shoulder hitting the metal slat of the seat. Through the pain, he heard something new, a rustle coming from behind the nearest partition. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice shaking, but he didn't allow himself to panic. Only a rustle in response, closer now. He rose slowly and stepped forward. The door to the service compartment was ajar. He peered inside. A newspaper lay on the floor, yellowed, old, but clearly dated 1912. Edward swallowed. How was that possible? A long groan came from deep inside the compartment. And then the train jerked again, the lights went out, and it was completely dark. Chapter 7: Hopelessness. Edward froze. There was absolute darkness all around. He could feel the train still moving forward, but now the sound of the wheels was muffled, as if he were in another dimension. Behind him something stirred. He did not turn around. He felt it was best not to. But the voice whispered right behind his ear. "Time's up." Something cold touched his neck. Edward screamed and sprinted forward, hoping that there was a way out somewhere ahead. But the faster he ran, the longer the carriage became, and the louder the laughter behind him became. The story continues. Edward will have to find a way out or stay on the ghost train forever.